You're listening to the Monocle Daily, first broadcast on the 26th of August 2026 on Monocle Radio.
Iran and Oman might have done a deal. Does anyone still care what the United States wants? Is a geostrategic crisis potentially a soft power opportunity? And exciting news for anyone who thought US elections needed more balloons. I'm Andrew Muller. The Monocle Daily starts now. Hello and welcome to the Monocle Daily, coming to you from our studios here at Midori House in London. I'm Andrew Muller. My guests Nega Anga and Robin Lustig will discuss today's big stories, and our On This Day historical series will try making a case that American politics has always been nuts. We just used to notice less. Stay tuned, all that and more coming up right here on the Monocle Daily. This is the Monocle Daily. I'm Andrew Muller, and I am joined today by Nega Anga, former advisor to the US State Department and National Security Council, and Robin Lustig, journalist and broadcaster, former presenter of The World Tonight on Radio 4. Hello to you both.
Hi.
Robin, first of all, you are shortly going to Vienna.
To Austria, but in fact to Salzburg.
To Salzburg, not Vienna.
Not Vienna, the city of Mozart.
There was me assuming. Austria is sort of the land of your forebears?
No, they came from Germany, but I love Austria because I love the mountains. Mm-hmm. And so my wife and I thought, few days in Salzburg, few days in the mountains, after the heat wave is over, should be quite pleasant. And we're going by sleeper train.
Oh, wow.
OK, now I am envious because I do enjoy a sleeper train ride.
Yeah.
What is the route from London? That's not direct.
London to
presumably.
Brussels, change platforms at Bruxelles Midi, and direct from Brussels to Salzburg.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, we look forward to hearing about that upon your return. Nega, hopefully later in the show we are actually talking about travel and other sort of soft power opportunities inspired by either crises or cultural happenstances or a combination of the two, and you are actually planning to sort of do that, at which point you're going to have to out yourself as such a tragic fan of the White Lotus that you're actually going to see where it was filmed.
Indeed. I have been very busy on a project, and so my reward is to go to Sicily in mid-October when the weather is nice, less tourists. And one of my aspirations is to take the White Lotus route and go to the various hotels and venues that they visited. So I'm doing all my research on Instagram.
Well, having abased yourself to that extent, I do feel like we owe it to you to give the project to which you refer a plug. We have talked about it before, but it does sound really cool.
Thank you. Yes, I'm working on a photography exhibition that will be exhibited in the Frankfurt City Hall, and I'm looking at the Islamic Sufi communities in Germany, in particular Frankfurt, and the project is the seen and the unseen. So you see them doing their spiritual practices and what they do on a day-to-day basis. So it launches October 16th in Frankfurt City Hall.
Well, we will start in the vicinity of the Strait of Hormuz, where various interested parties are attempting to rearrange things around the United States' efforts to extricate itself from the quicksand into which it has strode. According at least to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, who now appear to be running Iran, and with due acknowledgement that their word for anything is not something the prudent would take to the bank, Iran and Oman have come to terms on a deal to charge and divide tolls for using the Strait of Hormuz, which about 7 months ago was free to all comers and all goers. Meanwhile, Pakistan is pitching another peace deal to the United States and Iran. We will have more on this from our panel shortly, but first, here is Aaron David Miller speaking to us earlier. Aaron is a former American Middle East peace negotiator, a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and here are his 4 key principles of successful negotiation, whether neighbours or nations.
In order to have serious negotiations, you really need 4 things. You need 2 parties who are serious, willing, and able. Number 2, you need a shared sense of urgency, determined by pain and gain. Number 3, you need effective mediation, a third party that's willing to apply both honey on one hand and vinegar on the other. And the fourth element is that you need a balance of interests. You need an end state in which both parties walk away from the table believing quite legitimately that they've won and they're able to sell what they won to their respective constituencies. This is not a con job. It has to reflect a meaningful balance of interest.
That was Aaron David Miller, former American Middle East peace negotiator. Naga, does it strike you, if we apply Aaron's 4 criteria to this schmozzle, that we can tick any of those boxes just yet?
We're not there yet.
Oh, good.
The Iranians do not trust President Trump, so they are running the clock on him for as long as they can. President Trump right now has lost the sense of urgency. I think he's essentially moved the issue off the front burner, put it to the back burner. It's moved from a military engagement to economic warfare, essentially just to calm tensions until the midterms and maybe a little bit after the midterms. For right now, at one point Trump was essentially giving them honey and vinegar options. Right now it's all vinegar. He's going to try to crush Iran's economic apparatus as much as they can. So no, I would, the short answer is no. We don't have those 4 scenarios, in my opinion.
Robin, I think it's fair to say that this project of the United States, and at least initially Israel, has over the last 6 months deviated somewhat from the original intention. And we will be talking more about this in the Foreign Desk this coming Saturday, as well, as we are about 6 months in, give or take. Would you dare rank it anywhere in particular on the scale of great foreign policy disasters of recent decades?
I suppose it ranks with Suez, when Britain, France and Israel thought they could seize the Suez Canal by military means. The United States disagreed and basically told them not to be so silly. And it marked the beginning of the end of British and French imperial involvement in the whole of the Middle East region. So I think it's on that sort of scale. Argentina's invasion of the Falkland Islands in 1982 was both a military disaster and then very quickly for the fascist regime which was in charge in Argentina at the time, a political disaster because they were overthrown shortly thereafter. So those are 2 that immediately come to mind. I don't think the US and Israeli attack on Iran ranks quite as high as that because both the Iranian regime and the Trump administration are still in power, and there is no sign of either of them being dislodged as a result of their miscalculations. Whether Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel survives the upcoming elections in Israel in October remains to be seen. But if he's dislodged, it'll be about, I think, far more than his attempt to dislodge the Iranian regime.
Nagar, because one of the difficulties of trying to understand what's going on here is that nobody really knows who is actually making the decisions in Iran. We still have not heard or seen a squeak out of the alleged supreme leader, i.e. son of the former. The IRGC, through whom all of this stuff appears to be coming, are also suggesting that if this arrangement with Oman exists, and Oman has not yet acknowledged that it does, that it's only temporary. So is this more posturing on their part? Is it clear what they actually want?
Well, I think the Iranians are quite clear about what they want. They want to control the Hormuz. They want to control their surrounding, and they want to exert as much pressure on the United States and the Gulf nations in enforcing their power. I think they have been successful in that sense. The proxies have come out much stronger than ever before in support of the IRGC. We have to bear in mind the Supreme Leader Khamenei Jr. is part of the IRGC apparatus. Mm-hmm. He is their guy, and with the recent shakeup of essentially the Iranian cabinet, we're starting to see a lot of wartime commanders come into play, who are essentially functioning in a decision-making process. I think the executive decision lies with Khamenei Jr. But the reality is they again, as I said earlier, they're running the clock. They are going to continue functioning in this way for as long as they can. The reality is we haven't seen Iran's main backers like China come in and back the United States in this case. China has already reacted negatively to the secondary sanctions that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent sort of announced on Monday, because that it will essentially impact the large Chinese banks who do operate with the U.S. dollar. So, again, until we start seeing some shifts in balance geopolitically, Iran knows it can continue to play this card for as long as it wants to, and it will definitely try to do this through the remainder of the Trump administration.
Robin, we will talk shortly about what this means for the Gulf states to the extent that we currently understand what is occurring. But before we come back to you, we will hear from our Gulf correspondent. This is Inzamam Rashid.
Paying for safe passage through your own neighbourhood is hardly anyone's idea of strategic independence, which is why what happens next will be very interesting. The UAE has already built pipelines to Fujairah outside the Strait. Saudi Arabia can push crude west towards the Red Sea, of course, if the Houthis don't attack them. And new ports, pipelines and trade routes are all part of the same calculation. So yes, Oman may help broker a deal over the Strait of Hormuz and get it reopened, but the Gulf's longer-term response is probably simpler. Make sure next time it has another way out.
Thank you, Inzi. Robin, because this point, and I think it is a serious one, has tended to get somewhat occluded, that tucked up behind the Strait of Hormuz and absolutely reliant upon it are the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and not incidentally the US Navy's Fifth Fleet, presently based in Bahrain. If the strait is not reopened permanently as it was, this changes kind of everything for those states, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It also, in the long term, might change things for Iranian calculations as well, because the longer this goes on, the more the oil exporters of the region will be looking for alternative routes to get their product out. The Saudis are already pumping quite a lot of oil west across the Arabian Peninsula to the Red Sea. And although it's true that the Houthis in Yemen are making the southern route out of the Red Sea problematic, there is also a northern route, because there is a pipeline across Egypt, paralleled almost to the Suez Canal. And although big oil tankers can't go through the Suez Canal, I was reading just a few hours ago that some Saudi oil is now being shipped north in the Red Sea towards Egypt, and then by pipeline north towards the Mediterranean. So there are alternatives, and the more that the oil exporters begin to understand how they can use the alternatives, the less the Strait of Hormuz becomes essential to their economic future, and the less it becomes a weapon that Iran can profitably use.
Negar, just finally on this one, we did mention at the top introducing this item, and that's what Aaron David Miller was explaining to us or elaborating upon, that Pakistan is pitching what it thinks is another 60-day path to a settlement, and the deal seems once again to involve Iran reopen Hormuz, in return for which the United States lifts sanctions. But even if any of that happens, does that solve the problem permanently?
We're not looking at a grand peace deal right now. What we're looking at is a temporary pause in this tit for tat. They're essentially trying to solve the political process, because the reality is both parties need to come to the table, find a diplomatic off ramp, and move forward. Pakistan has essentially this role of being the mediator in this process. So their actions right now are pretty standard procedure. And we're going to keep seeing this. We're going to keep seeing these neighbors come in and try to find a solution, because the reality is, the problem that originally, sparked a lot of the concerns was the missiles, was the nuclear file. And we're not there yet. Right now it's the terms are simply focused on the water passageway and in return sanctions relief for the Iranian public.
Well, to Greenland now, a territory generally paid little attention on the grounds that it's miles from anywhere and has a population roughly the size of that of Barrow-in-Furness. However, earlier this year, during one strange and fevered week, which Monocle Radio had the pleasure of spending in the Greenlandic capital of Nuuk, Greenland became the most talked about place on Earth as US President Donald Trump sized it up as his next conquest, summoning the exciting prospect of a sort of civil war within NATO. As subscribers to the Monocle Minute will have read this morning, however, Greenland is hoping to capitalise somewhat on the attention. Greenland's new film institute seeks to promote Greenlandic cinema. We'll have more from our panel shortly, but first, some regional movie recommendations from some of Monocle's resident cineasts.
Brazilian cinema is where it's at. And it's not just me, a Brazilian, of course, Fernando Augusto Pacheco, saying, but it is true. After we won the Oscar in 2025 for Best International Feature for I'm Still Here, we're rocking it. The Secret Agent by Kleber Mendonça Filho was nominated for 4 Oscars this year and won in Cannes for Best Director and Actor for Wagner Moura. Our cinema industry is booming. And those are not only critic darlings, by the way. Both films did very well at the box office in Brazil, with organizations like the BFI here in London doing special seasons on Brazilian cinema. It is about time for you to know the wonders of Brazilian cinema.
I'm Steph Chungu, I am the producer of Meet the Writers, and Nollywood has been the focal point of African cinema for decades, but Zambian cinema is slowly coming out of the shadow and making its own mark on the cultural sector. One film I definitely recommend is Becoming a Guinea Fowl, released in 2024, directed by Rungano Nyoni, which earned her multiple nominations at the British Independent Film Awards and won the feature film competition at the Zurich Film Festival in the same year. What I loved about the film, it actually showcases the Bemba tribe, which is not really as prominent as the other tribes in the country, and does show the family dynamics and traditional values, which is often disputed in the country. I highly recommend it.
Hi, my name is Julia Jen. I'm Monocle Radio's Ukraine expert. Filmmaking in Ukraine has a very rich history. In the Soviet Union, the country was at the centre of the cinema industry. Breakthrough films like Dziga Vertov's Man with a Movie Camera and Serhiy Eisenstein's Battleship Potemkin were filmed and produced in the country. Classics include Alexander Dorozhenko's Earth and Serhiy Parajanov's Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors. But after years of underfunding since Ukraine's independence, there has been a renaissance in the industry. If you're looking for a great contemporary Ukrainian film, look at Pamfir. It was released in 2022, and it's a magical, surreal look at the country today.
That was, in that order, Fernando Augusto Pacheco, Steph Chungu and Julia Jen. Robin, I'll start with you. Returning to the thought of Greenland and the idea that it might kind of leverage the nonsense of earlier this year to bring about a renaissance in Greenlandic cinema, are you, for one, more interested in Greenland than you might have been this time last year?
Yes. And I will watch a Greenlandic film if I get the opportunity to do so. And the reason I say that is that I still have very powerful memories of 2 Mongolian films that I watched about 20 years ago. One called The Cave of the Yellow Dog, the other called The Story of the Weeping Camel. Both beautiful films which taught me more about Mongolia and the Mongolian people than I ever would have dreamt I could learn by either watching TV or reading books. So yes, I know very little about Greenlandic culture. I will learn a lot about Greenlandic culture by watching Greenlandic films.
Nega, I was thinking when I was reading Michael Booth's piece in the Minute this morning about this, of one of the people that we met in Greenland when we were making a run of shows in Nuuk in January, and he was a local business owner whose business, and we were talking off the record, so I'm being vague, but his business does have a certain outward-facing aspect. And he said, honestly, if President Trump had talked about Greenland for 3 months and then shut up, he'd be a national hero. Because he said, not just my business, but everybody else's business. Inquiries, bookings just went absolutely off the charts because you had this huge American audience thinking, God, Greenland, never heard of it. And then looking it up and thinking, wow, that looks really cool. He said once he started talking about invading us, then, yeah, all the bookings then completely evaporated. But he said, yeah, bit from column A and a bit from column B, really. So is there something to the idea, do you think, that if you look for the opportunity in a crisis, it is kind of always there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, I'm blanking on the expression, but isn't it like, bad press is good press?
I think all publicity is good publicity.
Exactly. And essentially that's what it is. I think the problem with Greenland is there was this need for sort of like narrative sovereignty. So it's not so much, President Trump's spin on a country, but absolutely. I think you have to find these unfortunate opportunities from the chaos, and we see it across the board in various other industries.
Indeed, we do, Robin. I think there is also a thing where people who may be sympathetic to a particular protagonist also, this is their way of buying into it, and I'm hoping none of this sounds patronising or derisory, because I don't think it's an ignoble instinct at all, but thinking of things like, Ukraine's Kalush Orchestra winning Eurovision in 2022 with what was admittedly a very decent pop tune, or Jafar Panahi's A Simple Accident winning the Palme d'Or at Cannes this year, and actually lots of Iranian films this year. And again, I don't think they're just winning lots of prizes because of this thing. Iranian cinema is a long and venerable tradition, but there is something going on there, isn't there?
Yes, I think history will tell us that out of adversity comes quite often interesting art. There's that old saying, isn't there, that Switzerland had 1,000 years of peace and produced the cuckoo clock. Italy had 1,000 years of war and produced, the art that we all know about. So, yes, I do think there is something in it. I wouldn't argue that it was a case for welcoming the threats of military invasion by powerful neighbours. But nevertheless, I think it is an example of the power of the human spirit, that out of adversity people can find the strength to produce interesting, worthwhile art.
But because there is a related phenomenon as well, Nagar, to which you alluded at the top of the show by talking about your White Lotus-influenced itinerary of Sicily, and I bet you're really glad now that you mentioned that. But Greece is reporting this year an upsurge in bookings associated with Christopher Nolan's film of the Odyssey, and there are various Greek jurisdictions actually spending money trying to emphasise the Odyssey connection to promote further tourism. Not that Greece usually struggles to get people to visit.
Right, but there's an element of commercial soft power, right? There is an element to gain because, again, you have very short moments in time. Unless a film is rich, maybe centuries old rich or decades old rich, like The Godfather, and people will want to follow that. But again, it's finding those ripe opportunities to give people the experience. And the reality is, we're living in times of. We are living in times of Instagram and TikTok, and you do have an entire generation that follows their history, that follows the culture through these social media apps and want to experience it. They want to have, content-filled opportunities. And that is essentially what is being provided to them on a silver platter. So I'm clearly not judging. So
Well, to the United States now, where the gathering midterm election campaign season will be enlivened on September 9th and 10th by a sort of semi-convention thrown by the Republican Party in Dallas. There is, incredibly, some grumbling and apprehension afoot about the prospect of this symposium, a combination of irritation at the cost of security, the price of tickets, the coincidence with the opening game of the NFL season, and the closeness to the 25th anniversary of the terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001, about which one or more speakers may imaginably make reasonable, nuanced, thoughtful, and in no respect deranged or inflammatory remarks. Robin, are we excited for the addition of the midterm convention to the American calendar? Listeners, Robin is already wincing.
Yeah, I have a sort of ghoulish curiosity to watch this sort of gathering of, I suppose it's a MAGA gathering by and large.
I would have thought so.
And, there is a fascination to see what these people say, how they behave, what mood they're in. I wouldn't want to be there myself, but I will read the reports, I will watch the TV coverage. I suppose I will follow what people are saying about it to a certain extent on social media. But I'll feel somewhat dirty by it all.
Nega, possibly cynical interpretation of events over here. Is this the Republican Party thinking our polling is in the tank, gas prices are up, grocery prices are up, we've started a war we can't figure out how to finish, some balloons and fireworks?
I mean, look, it's a big rallying event. That's what usually conventions, come down to.
They don't usually do them for midterms.
They don't. And, we have to bear in mind right now, this is very much driven by one particular personality, and people are going to be coming out for that one personality. He's not on the ballot. And this is, a way of essentially putting him on the ballot, bringing his followers to the venue, to the event, getting them to go vote. So I do think, there's an element of potential effectiveness of this tactic. And, conventions bring a lot of airtime coverage on U.S. networks, on the
It'll
radio.
be interesting to see how much coverage this one gets on U.S. networks, because they don't automatically cover everything that President Trump does these days, do they?
They don't, but he always has a zinger here or there, so it's hard not to have someone present and filming it. And there's going to be elements of live coverage. I mean, quite frankly, Fox News is going to, I'm sure, cover it from cover the entire thing. But you're always going to have personalities. You're going to have musicians, sports personalities or whatnot coming on stage, and so that does actually drive coverage in many ways. So yeah, this is not a nominating, presidential convention, but it does gather attention, and that is essentially what they are seeking. And they do need voters to go vote. They do need MAGA voters to vote for this midterm sweep. There is we've been seeing this progressive Democratic win taking the United States by storm at this point. And so I could see how they're concerned, especially with President Trump not being on the ballot right now.
Robin, just finally on this, we will shortly be closing the show with our On This Day feature, which by happy coincidence does relate to a particular American convention, this being the infamous Democratic one of 1968 in Chicago. I do occasionally like to joke rather leadenly with some of our more, shall I say, experienced panellists about long-distant historical events that presumably you were there, but you actually kind of were.
I actually kind of was. I wasn't in Chicago, but I was in the United States. I was studying politics at the time. I was preparing a finals paper on the presidential campaign of a Democratic candidate called Eugene McCarthy, who was roundly defeated. But I was staying in the home of relatives in Washington, D.C., glued to the TV set night after night, as we watched the United States democratic system teetering, because that convention was, in its way, almost what people who will remember January the 6th, 2021 will remember. It was a moment when the whole system was shuddering, and it was very, very scary.
Because just finally and briefly on that point, Robin, the thesis, spoiler, that is about to be unfurled is that American politics, and no offence, but it's always been crazy. And it's just that now, because of our interconnected world and social media, etc., we just end up hearing more about it. Do you think that's right, or has it got objectively madder?
No, I think there's a lot in that. I mean, 1968 was the height of the Vietnam War, when thousands of young American men were being drafted into the U.S. military and sent to Vietnam. A presidential candidate, Robert F. Kennedy, had been assassinated. A civil rights leader, Martin Luther King, had been assassinated. It was a country of immense violence. There were race riots. The way in which the mayor of Chicago at the time, Richard Daley, put down. The protests in Chicago was absolutely beyond anybody's imagination.
You're doing a lot of spoilers here at this point.
I'm sorry about that, but I have very vivid memories of it, as you can tell. American politics have been violent for many, many years. They did, after all, have a civil war.
They did indeed. Let's not tempt fate any further. Robin Lustig and Nega Unger, thank you both for joining us. And finally, on today's show, our On This Day historical series does attempt to demonstrate that American politics and American political events are perhaps not notably weirder now than previously.
You don't believe we're on the eve of destruction.
It is both fashionable and forgivable to survey the current state of American politics and despair for the Republic, to fret that it has never been like this before, so divided, so angry, so obviously led by people so hopelessly unqualified to meet the moment.
And then they have cans of soup, and they throw the cans of soup.
It is an understandable lament, but not an altogether accurate one. The United States, and sincerely bless it for bequeathing us the idea of life, liberty and the pursuit of happiness as organising principles of human society, has been, from the first report of a Minuteman's musket, a rowdy, rancorous and singularly unruly madhouse. The events in Chicago, which commenced on August 26, 1968, are summoned as a demonstration of this thesis only due to a coincidence of that date with the date of this broadcast. Open any US history book at a random page. There'll be some bizarre brouhaha on it you've never heard of and which everyone in America has forgotten, and which would have been the only thing any other country talked about for years.
After 81 days of a standoff with the FBI, the Montana Freemen have surrendered. All 16 of the people inside the Justice Township compound have turned themselves over to federal agents.
For example. But on August 26, 1968, the Democratic Party arrived in Chicago for its quadrennial convention.
Yes, I even killed my brothers and so many others, but I ain't marching anymore.
A few months earlier, on March 31st, incumbent Democratic President Lyndon Johnson had announced that whoever the convention nominated for 1968's presidential election, it wouldn't be him.
I do not believe that I should devote an hour or a day of my time to any personal partisan causes or to any duties other than the awesome duties of this office, the presidency of your country. Accordingly, I shall not seek and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
Johnson could, technically, have had another go. He had inherited the White House upon the assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963 and had only won one term on his own account. But one did not need to be a political operator of LBJ's caliber to appreciate the hopelessness of his position. He was exhausted by America's war in Vietnam, as was the country at large, and his approval rating had slumped to the kind of depths from which there is no return.
Lyndon Johnson told the nation, have no fear of escalation. I am trying everyone to please. Though it isn't really war, we're sending 50,000 more to help save Vietnam from Vietnamese.
In the months between LBJ's recusal and the Democratic Convention convening in Chicago, the United States was further roiled by two assassinations. On April 4th, the civil rights figurehead Martin Luther King Jr. was shot dead in Memphis, as announced to a horrified crowd in Indianapolis by Robert F. Kennedy, the former Attorney General, younger brother of the former president, who was now seeking the Democratic nomination himself.
I have some very sad news for all of you. And that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis.
Just past midnight on June 5th, RFK was gunned down in Los Angeles, minutes after acknowledging victory in the California and South Dakota primaries.
The vote here in the state of California, the vote in the state of South Dakota Here is the most urban state of any of the states of our union. South Dakota, the most rural state of any of the states of our union. We're able to win them both. I think that we can end the divisions within the United States.
And between LBJ throwing in the towel and the Democratic Party convention delegates beginning to gather at the International Amphitheatre on the south side of Chicago on this day 58 years ago, maybe another 8,000 American kids had been killed in Vietnam in a war that LBJ didn't start but clearly had no idea how to stop, as he anguished in a phone call to General Earl G. Wheeler, then chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
I've got to find some alternatives to turn some of this thing around a little bit. If we don't, we're going to be in trouble, and Vietnam is the only thing, and it just murdered me.
The convention, to simplify matters, was two conflicts. Inside the hall, the split was between rival factions of the party. The Democratic Party, divided, imagine. The issue was inevitably Vietnam. The dovish tendency favoured Minnesota Senator Eugene McCarthy. The hawks hovered behind Johnson's vice president, Hubert Humphrey.
Mr. Democrat, let's unite our cause so nothing can go wrong.
In the streets outside, however, it was on for young and old between the Chicago Police Department, unleashed by interminably serving Chicago Mayor Richard J. Daley.
That this administration, our administration, and the people of Chicago have never and will condone brutality at any time. But they will never permit a lawless, violent group of terrorists to menace the lives of millions of people, destroy the purpose of this national convention, and take over the streets of Chicago.
And a hefty contingent of peaceniks, beatniks, freaks, weirdos and yahoos, some, such as the Students for a Democratic Society, relatively orthodox in their approach, others, such as the Youth International Party, or Yippies, led by Abby Hoffman, somewhat less so.
That's essentially what we're going to do, is throw a lot of banana peels around Chicago and have the machine stumble. And when it stumbles, it gets into a policy of overkill, and it starts to devour itself.
It all got a bit inevitable.
The police fired tear gas canisters. The demonstrators threw them back at the police. It was clear that the battle, Chicago's first real battle of the day, was about to be joined.
Amazingly, nobody was killed, though many were injured. Not for the first or last time, the uproar would end up prompting the question of whether America's talent for instantly mythologizing its traumas was actually part of the problem. There was quite a good song by Graham Nash.
In a land that's known as freedom, how can such a thing be fair? Won't you please come to Chicago for the help that we can bring?
There was a masterpiece of new journalism by Norman Mailer.
A stillness rose through the steel and stone of the hotel, congregating in the shocked centres of every room where delegates and their wives and press and campaign workers, innocent until now of the intimate working of social force, look down now into the murderous paradigm of Vietnam there beneath them, at this huge intersection of this great city.
And there was a trial of Abby Hoffman and a half-dozen co-accused who would become known as the Chicago Seven, which could have been a Marx Brothers movie.
It's good to be back. If it wasn't for John Dillinger and us, who would know about Chicago?
For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Muller.
Open up the door.
And that is all for this edition of the Monocle Daily. Thanks to our panellists today, Nega Anger and Robin Lustig. Today's show was produced by Hassan Anderson and researched by Kaylee Martin. Our sound engineer was Steph Chungu, with additional editing from Christy O'Grady and Lily Austin. I'm Andrew Muller here in London. The Daily is back at the same time tomorrow, but playing us out tonight, Tim Curry, who has died at the age of 80. Curry's career in theatre, film and television spans 7 decades, and though inevitably varied, he did have a predilection and an irrepressible aptitude for the screen-dominating, larger-than-life eccentric. This, inevitably, though we think fittingly, is from the role for which he will be best remembered, Dr. Frankenfurter of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Thanks for listening.
'Cause I've seen love.